الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد عن ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن الصدق يهدي إلى البر وإن البر يهدي إلى الجنة وإن الرجل ليصدق حتى يكون صديقا وإن الكذب يهدي إلى الفجور وإن الفجور يهدي إلى النار وإن الرجل ليكذب حتى يكتب عند الله كذابا أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وصل على المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that verily indeed truthfulness takes a person towards piety, towards goodness, towards good deeds, and piety leads a person towards Jannat. وَإِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَا يَصْدُقُ حَتَّى يَكُونُ صِدِّيقًا. And a person who is truthful, who is honest, and he has this quality of truthfulness, he will be regarded in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a Siddiq. The second part of the hadith we are going to begin today, وَإِنَّ الْكَذِبَ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْفُجُورِ. That verily lying and kidhb takes a person towards fujur, towards sins, disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards evil. وَإِنَّ الْفُجُورَ يَهْدِي إِلَى النَّارِ. Disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sin, evil, takes a person towards Jahannam. وَإِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَكْذِبْ. And a person who is habitual liar, who has got the habit of lying, he continues to lie until that in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he is regarded as a kadhab, as a liar. One aspect of lying is against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another aspect of lying is against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another aspect of lying is against the creation, against each other. And some aspects are interlinked, they link to one, to second, to third category, they link with each other. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنِ افْتَرَى عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا أَوْ كَذَّبَ بِآيَاتِهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. That those who invent a lie against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, against, or they reject His ayat, reject His verses or signs, meaning that they claim something about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has said, or He has sent, or He has done, or He is, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not said, or He is not that, He has not done this. So, or a person, he denies the proofs and the evidences of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the signs and the evidences, a person rejects them. This will divide into different categories. For example, a person lying against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such a way that he claims certain attributes, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has certain attributes, certain sifat, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have those sifat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have those characteristics. It could be, for example, humanly characteristics, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a figure, has a form, have a body shape. So this is lying against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that aspect. Like this, a person, he lies about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about certain ahkam. In the 14th juz at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that وَلَا تَقُولُوا in the last, second to last side, that certain people who are such that who say this is halal and this is haram, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't make this halal or didn't make this haram. So a person, he makes this and he associates it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do this and not to do this, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't make this halal, He didn't make this haram. So a person who changes the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another lying against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to claim to have certain type of divine knowledge, that Allah has inspired me, or Allah has revealed this to me. Whereas the revelation coming down now has stopped from Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After that, the direct revelation is not going to come. Yes, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspires people. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-mubashirat. Al-mubashirat refers to certain dreams which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives a message through, or He gives certain understanding through. So mubashirat are there. But a person claims that Allah has showed me this in the dream, or Allah has revealed this to me. So there are certain types. These are those are against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person, he does claim these sort of lying against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously there are severe punishments. إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. A person who does this, he will never be successful. A person will never be successful. Like this, he will be disgraced in this world, he will be disgraced in the hereafter as well. And there are many other harms of lying against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's possible that he may lose his own faith, he may lose his iman, and will leave this world without the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one aspect, lying against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another aspect that we have is against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Man kadhaba alayya muta'ammidan falyatabawwa maq'adahu min an-nar. Or kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that a person who intentionally lies against me, then let him make his seat in the fire of Jahannam. Meaning, his final abode will be the fire of Jahannam. Similar things here that to attribute to Allah, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam about certain aspects, certain characteristics, certain ahkam, certain sunnats, whereas Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't have those akhlaq or those sifat, or he didn't have those practices in his life. But a person attributes it towards Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a person who does this, thinking that the Prophet did this and he's has this, is adamant on this, now obviously he is lying against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ مِنَ النَّارِ. His final abode will be the fire of Jahannam. This is why the ulama, whenever they mention the hadith, they mention أَوْ كَمَا قَالَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ, that towards this Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. Or they say the meaning of this hadith, the nearest meaning of this hadith is this. Abdullah radiallahu anhu, the son of Zubair radiallahu anhu, he says to his father, why is it that I don't see you narrating that many ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why don't I see you narrating many ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He answered that I have this fear that I may attribute towards something to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam which he may have not said. So then he narrated the hadith as man kadhaba alayya falyatabawwa maq'adahu min an-nar. Slightly different wording, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever tells a lie against me, then his final abode will be the fire of Jahannam. So this is another aspect of lying against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The third aspect is to lying against another person, another being. Now this could be either to disgrace the person, to lower their ranks, to humiliate the person. It could be deceiving the other person, slandering, accusation. So there are so many aspects, spreading rumors, whereas Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has, Quran Sharif itself, it says that a person should not do this. The Sahabiyat, when they came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to get bay'at, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentions around 6 things in this long verse. Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu idha ja'aka al-mu'minat yubayyi'naka ala an la yushrikna billahi shay'a wa la yasriqna wa la yazni. In this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the women who came to get bay'at to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they focused on 6 aspects, such as not to do shirk, not to kill, not to commit adultery, and one of them is about not to slander. And generally, وَلَا يَعْصِينَكَ فِي مَعْرُوفٍ, we will not commit anything evil, we will not disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is lying against another human being. This slander, to accuse again directly about another being, is another aspect of lying. This is something which is related to our tongue. Imam Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi, he has mentioned around 20 sins that can be done by the tongue. Around 20 sins that can be done by the tongue. And he says that out of them, the 2 of them are one of the most common, one of the most severe and great. One of them is ghibat and one of them is lying. And these two are very common, very common. So Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi, he says that 20 sins are done by the tongue, and two of them which are the worst severe one of them is ghibat and lying. He explains that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in one hadith, he was asked that what are the great sins? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he counted three things. He counted three big sins. Akbarul Kabair. You already have major sins. Out of those, what are the more major sins, more higher major sins? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he counted three of them. One is shirk, associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his being or in his sifat. And another one is uququl walidain, disobedience of the parents. And the third one is qawlu zur, lying. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he highlighted that lying is such a big sin. Now when he mentioned this hadith, the first two times when the first two sins that he mentioned, he was sort of leaning back. But when he was talking about qawlu zur, lying, he actually sat up straight and he repeated this lying, qawlu zur several times to show how severe this sin is and how evil this sin is. One of the Sahabis came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he says that, look, I have three sins in my life which are very common that I have a habit of. One of them is zina, one of them is stealing, and one of them is lying. So he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, give me advice, that which one should I leave? That should I leave zina, or should I leave stealing, or should I leave lying? Now generally when we think that zina is so bad, how can a person commit such act, or how can a person steal? Lying is something that very lightly people take, and people are, for protectors, Allah protect us, people are very commonly involved in. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, using his hikmah, he said that don't lie. So the Sahabi was told that you work on this. So he said, okay. Now when he came, for example, for stealing, and he thought that, okay, if I go to steal, what will happen if I get caught? I will have to make a story up. If I go to make a story up, then I will be lying. Because I can't make the story up, that means I can't do that. I can't steal. So he stopped from this bad habit. Similarly, adultery and zina, he thought that, look, if I get caught, something happens, I will be questioned, investigated, etc. I will have to come up with a story again, but I can't lie. So slowly, that habit also he got rid of. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, using his wisdom, he explained to this Sahabi that work on this, then a person will be able to get rid of this, the other sins as well. So lying is such that it takes a person towards sins. It takes a person towards sins. And al-fujur is something that takes a person towards Jahannam. Now sins, there are many harms and effects of sin. The way we do a good deed, it actually has a positive energy to it, positive benefit to it. Like this, when a person does a sin, when he lies, it releases a very bad odor from his mouth. When a person lies, it releases a bad odor from his mouth. We may not be able to sense and smell this bad odor, but the angels, the malaika that are around us, they can sense this. That's why the hadith said that when a person does sin, the angels and malaika run a mile away from us. They can sense this. This is something got to do with our spirituality. We may not be able to see, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes He grants this quality to certain people, certain individuals, that they can see certain things. For example, it's very famous about Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, that when he would be sat and somebody would be doing wudu close to him, he would see what sort of sins are being washed away from this person doing the wudu. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him see all of these things. However, he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, take this ability away from me, that I don't want to see the evil and the habit of others. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away. So this is something that is there. We may not be on that spiritual level in order to sense this, but it does happen. That's why, certain, you may come stories about our ulama, our mashayikh, pious people, non-alim as well, that they leave this world. And when they are buried, good fragrance is coming out of their graves. Even the clothes that they were wearing, They have good fragrance coming out of their body. Why? Because the good deeds that they were involved in, reciting the Quran and the habit of reading the Quran, has a good odor, has a good smell, has a good fragrance to it. So they don't put fragrance, they don't apply anything. But just that naturally Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioned that, his sweat would be like fragrance as well, that the wife would collect it and they would use it. It was very ajib things. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has this. So like this, when a person does a sin, when he commits an evil action, disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it gives out a bad odor, bad smell. This is, hurt and harm those malaika that are around us. Therefore, a person should think on this hadith that if I want to go into Jannat, one way to go into Jannat is to work on this. That am I truthful in all aspects of my life, in my speech, in my actions, in my intentions. And if I want, to check in my life that is lying in my life or not. There were many other aspects. We'll finish on one story, lying against another person. Mufti Taqi Usmani Dawud Barakatuh mentioned a story that a foreigner came to me. And he says, Mufti Sahib, I'm very lucky that I've got extra days to stay behind now, so I can stay with you. So he goes, what do you mean? He goes, I was supposed to be returning today, but what's happened is that one of the family members, they've got some occasion happening. So what happened was that I sent I actually requested to make dua. The Mufti Sahib make dua that my extended leave is accepted. Extended leave is accepted. So he goes, what do you mean? Because I was supposed to return back to work today, but one of the family members, some occasion has come up. So I've sent an notice to my workplace that I'm fallen ill. So can I have an extra 1 week or 2 weeks off? So Allah protect, the person is lying, but he hasn't even acknowledged that he's lying here. So the Mufti Taqi Sahib Dawud Barakatuh, he says that because he was somebody that I knew in a very gentle manner, I explained to him that, look, this one action you've done, look how many evil sins behind it. You've lied, you made somebody else lie. Now because when you need to send a sick note, you need a doctor's note. So because of your lie, you're making the doctor's lie as well. Number two, you're lying. The person, now he's going to receive that notice, he's going to extend your leave, your sick pay. Now the 1 week or 2 weeks payment that you're going to receive, that's actually a lie as well, because you don't actually deserve that payment. That actually is not, you're not eligible for receiving that amount of payment. So that's another lie, you're deceiving. So many, because of this one thing, you've done so much wrong at the same time. Then the Sati, he goes, next time inshallah I won't do this again. So this is a lying against another being as well. Inshallah we'll mention, there are certain times where lying could be permissible. Yes, it could be permissible that when can you, make up a lie, and the certain effects of sins as well that we mentioned in our next list. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the correct understanding and the ability to bring this quality of speaking the truth and staying away from lying. Allahumma ameen, subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallah bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, subhana rabbika rabbil izzati ma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin, bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahim. Jazakum.